Useful. So moving on to the session and our panel today, we have Matt Coyne here, who's chairing the debate. Matt is Technology Engagement Architect for N200 GES. We then have Roisin O'Bralachan, Event Tech Consultant for Reed and Mackay, and Jim Curry, the owner of Exhibitor Smarts. So let's face it, event tech is moving so fast, isn't it? But is this new, ever-changing, pushing the boundaries technology ever a case of the emperor's new clothes? Do you get your money's worth, and do we have to make sure that we're spending the right money in the right time and in the right place? Well, to explore that subject, here are my panel discussing, if it isn't broken, does it need fixing? Over to you guys.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Can you all hear me all right? Okay, good. So I guess the first part of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Should we discuss America today? It's kind of pertinent to what happened last night. I don't know, maybe avoid that subject. There we go, it's a little bit better. Okay, so often we see technology that comes and goes, and sometimes it's a fad, sometimes it turns into something reality. And I think this session, we're hoping to just do a little bit more of a discussion about that, and it's not necessarily focusing on one individual product, for example, but it could be looking at how we address it as suppliers or organizers, or what we look at to sort of make things not a fad, but actually make something really useful. So Jim comes from the exhibition background, so he'll have some opinions on that side of stuff, and Roisin from the corporate sector as well. So hopefully we'll get a little bit of a mix of what's going on. So first question that we had when we started talking about the subject was, what's broken? Jim, exhibitions.
Okay, so I've probably broken it down into for exhibitions, purely for exhibitions, probably broken it down into 4 categories. And that would be, within the sector, you've got organisers, suppliers, venues, and customers, visitors. I don't think much is broken on the organiser side. You know, £2.4 billion in private equity was invested in exhibition organisers last year, so that's in rude health. Venues, particularly in the UK, they're fine. But the 2 areas that I would say that the exhibition industry is suffering would be first the suppliers, because of the commoditisation of the products that they're providing. And the second sector would be the exhibitors. You know we're only too well that there was some research undertaken, I think earlier this year, where exhibitor NPS is down to -18, which indicates that we have a serious problem in terms of managing the expectations and the performance of exhibitors within the exhibition industry. And so they're my 2 areas that I think that we've got significant problems with.
So relevant to the exhibitor piece, maybe to start with, if exhibitors are unhappy as they come to events, what can be done about that? So obviously we're at a tech show. What are people doing to start to measure, monitor? How can we fix that?
Yeah, I think it's you've got different elements of exhibitor key metrics. I think a lot of people will look at retention and acquisition, and then secondly, the performance for the exhibitor. I think the NPS score highlights that exhibitors aren't overtly impressed with the process that they have to do to undertake it, because it's hard work, right, in comparison to all the other media and marketing options that they've got. So, and I don't think as a industry we make it any easier. I think we put layers on top of those processes. So exhibitor management specifically, and the processes that they have to go through in order to get to that point, I would say is what's broken and that needs fixing.
So if you've got with exhibitors, there's a whole host of products. So, you know, we do Visit Connect, for example. You've got Poke and Conduco. You've got Feather doing various things, for example. All of those things I can see amazing value in. But is what you're saying, that's not an easy process for exhibitors to take up and actually use, or all those different products?
I think it's easy if you work in the industry, if you work in the exhibition industry. And, you know, the majority of exhibitors here, or the ones that you cite, they work in the exhibition industry. But if you take sort of a widget manufacturer. He doesn't work in exhibitions. He probably goes to one exhibition once a year or once every 2 years, and everything's new and things move on. And all of a sudden, he's got a whole load of processes, a whole load of manuals to fill in, a whole load of technology options that he has to consider, or she has to consider in order to have a successful event. And do we present those in a way that is adequate and cohesive to their understanding of their usage of that technology to a successful event, which ultimately will be top and bottom line performance for their business in over a 12-month period if they're investing significant amounts into that particular exhibition. Does that make sense?
Kind of. Does that make sense for everyone else? Okay, so Roisin, in the corporate sector, I mean, the same sort of question, like, what's broken?
Well, I think I actually came from an exhibition background, and when I moved more into kind of the corporate sector, I can see what a big difference it is, and that the technology doesn't work for the same sectors. It's not a one-size-fits-all, I think you had said before, and for us, a massive thing is trying to get the client to actually adopt the technology. They like the process, they like the way they work, they don't want massive change, and the only reason they want to use technology is to make the process more seamless, to save time, save money. And I see, and sometimes when you have technology, it's kind of like throw the kitchen sink at them, and it's like, right, use all of this, and then they get overwhelmed by it, and it's being very stressful. And like a lot of people turn around and say technology can be really exhausting, and it ends up just not really working for them, and not like kind of enhancing their experience. And then for the attendee, it doesn't work at all. So like there's all these different factors, like you were saying, where you have to look at what the client wants, what the organizer wants, and then what the end product, the attendee, are they actually going to even use it? Is it worth it at all?
So you mentioned 3 questions there straight away that maybe is what needs to be asked before deploying. It's not just technology, it's anything on any event. Does it generate revenue? Does it make processes easier? Does it save time, for example? In your role, in what you're doing, is that question being asked by corporates, or are they just kind of looking for the new shiny button to have on their phone, for example?
Yeah, I totally agree. Like a lot of people be like, okay, we want an event app, purely because they just want that icon on their phone. And but it's not necessarily, I think for us particularly, these events that we're corporate events usually aren't to make money. It's for the top end, like the partners or the big CEOs, to kind of come to an event and network with each other and go to their sessions and for information purposes. And the product, if it's a technology, needs to kind of help that, like give them the information, help them network. They don't need all the other gimmick stuff as well. And I think suppliers really need to look at kind of their audience in that case, because one app might have everything that it can do for a younger audience in like a techie event. It's great. But if you bring that to kind of a corporate event, which usually is the same year after year, they mightn't want all that stuff or mightn't work for it. So it's like really important to look, okay, what elements of the technology is going to work for that kind of event. And I think it's really important to split the sectors, like I was saying before, and kind of more the audience engagement.
So do suppliers providing this technology, do they need to be more specific in what they're offering, not just to say events and it can do everything? Does it need to be more focused, or do they need to work better together to offer all the different, from corporate to exhibitions, for example?
Yeah, I think definitely it's like communication, really. I think like if they're going to showcase their product, they have to understand what the event is, who the event is for, what the event organizers' challenges are, like why they want to use event technology. Is it to make the event organizer's life easier? Is it to enhance the delegate or attendees' experience? Like there's all different aspects there, and once they pin that down, then they can show them what their product can do in relation to that event and that sector, rather than saying, okay, well, this is everything it does, and it's great, and you have to use this element of it because it's really flashy and your attendees will really like it. But in a lot of cases, they don't know the attendees. They don't understand where they're coming from or what they needed for that event. So, you know.
And Jim, back on the exhibition sector, I mean, we kind of, when we were talking about this and what's broken and what's not working and what is, etc., you mentioned about the retail sector, and we're sort of looking at that compared to, say, exhibitions and the vast difference, it seems, in what's going on in the two. Could you tell us a bit more?
So basically I think exhibitions are in a really good place. You know, in terms of sort of mergers and acquisitions, you know, it's getting roughly about 3 multiples on the profits if they're selling. So it's really easy for organisers just to turn around and go, listen, we're performing well. You know, 23 pence in every pound that gets spent with us is pure profit. So you could almost like, you know, rest back on your laurels and say, everything's fine, there's nothing broken here, don't worry about it. But then, you know, all you have to simply do is look at sort of retail examples like how Amazon Prime now are really radically changing the retail space. And there were some really good retailers now that are having to battle against Amazon Prime. So the likes of Argos now are up in their game in terms of, you know, the expectations of what people want. And, you know, you can go all the way back. British Home Stores, Woolworths, all great companies in their time, but diminished. And I was reading an article by the CEO of Nokia, and basically he was being interviewed when Nokia got sold to Microsoft for like 5p or something like that, and they asked what happened, and he said, we didn't do anything wrong, the world changed. And I think that's what happens when you could have a really strong product and a really high-performing exhibition. But if the world changes or that sector changes, then you're going to be impacted on that. And I think that's what everyone's got to, you know, really sort of focus on, because the world is changing out there, and the way people engage with exhibitions isn't the same as what it was 5 years ago. You know, we've got all these information sources. You've got smaller events like Confexes that are impacting, and you've got things like Meetup. You know, people are finding it increasingly easy to host their own events, and the ability to attract an audience is increasing as well. So there are threats out there, and if you think that, oh, that's fine, you know, great, you know, we're on a 35 to 50% margin on our show, it's not broken, we're going to keep on going with our projected growth for year on year, that's fine, do that, but be aware there is a market that's changing, whether you're aware of it or not.
So it very much comes down to about adoption then, and slow to adopt, early adopters, that kind of whole adoption curve.
Exactly. So adoption of any technology. And the thing is, exhibitions, because they take place on a yearly basis or a biennial basis, something like that, you know, there's technology that's taking place or being promoted, and you haven't got a chance to do it. And if an organiser is slow on the adoption process, then they're not going to implement it for another 3 or 4 years or have any success for it. And that's counterintuitive to any of the targets that they've got, because every organiser works on a 12-month cycle, and they've got targets for those 12 months. So it's personal agenda and personal job security over a longer-term event success. That's what I believe anyway.
So they need to have a longer-term outlook.
Yeah, definitely.
But then, so Roisin, what we were saying before in the corporate market, and certainly the events that you work on, which you can't name for legal reasons, I think, but for privacy and things like that, a lot of technology that we have at the moment is talking about sharing and sharing and sharing again. But when it comes to, say, the corporate sector, maybe that's not so much the case, or certainly your sector. Yeah,
like definitely. Like I think. Like a lot of the new tech thing is all about like sharing social media. We can do this and that, and like when the events we work on, we don't want anything shared on social media. Our clients don't need that. It's not part of it. I think.
Sorry, why?
Because it's private, as you were saying. Like so, it's kind of like they're invitation-only events. Like it kind of leads on to the fact that like a lot of the tools now, it's all about how to market your event, how to make money of your event. But the events I work on, they don't want to make money. It's a completely different kind of event. And I think it's looking at that going, okay, well, you can't use the same technology for, say, a big tech exhibition like this to, say, a small meeting with 300 people who are going to discuss, I don't know, some kind of policies. Right, so and looking at a completely different audience as well. So they don't want all their information and data shared. They have no interest in sharing to the world or social media. What they want to come out of their events is maybe kind of, say for instance, they were going to use an app, is maybe to have like the slides on their app, something simple. It's very basic at that point for them, and they don't want to change up things as much. And I think when you have sometimes in our case, maybe the event organizer might want to use event technology to kind of help them and speed on the process and make it easier, but it isn't always adopted by the attendee. And you can really see that with apps as well. And I know everyone wants to go paperless and no programs, but I know we did an event recently and we did no programs at all. And this would have been the first time ever. And there was uproar about it, like, I want a hard copy program for this. But the funny thing was that because they had no choice, the adoption rate for the app was huge because they had to download it to be able to see the program and see who the speakers were. And it turns out that by the end of the event that the app was a great success. But if they had provided, I think, the hard copy and gone down the route of going, okay, we're also going to accommodate people who aren't as tech friendly, I don't think the app would not have had such a big success.
So, and that's probably where, again, and it applies back into the exhibition side of things, that if you're a long-standing exhibition, it's harder to change and harder to bring in some of this new technology, whereas if you're a startup, if you're a launch event, if you're a tech event like this, you can adopt that kind of stuff more quickly. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, I think, people are creatures of habit and routine, and if, I think there's been pretty clear case studies that I'm not going to mention on stage now, whereby established shows have tried to change either the format, the pricing format for visitors or exhibitors, or tried to change a process that they've undertaken, and it's been met with resistance. And if you're running a new event, you've got a clean sheet of paper that you can just there going, this is the way it's going to go, this is how we operate, and you can stamp a personality on it. An established event that's been running for 10, 15, 20 years, has an element of history, has an element of routine, and with that brings restrictions in how you can move that audience forward more.
And I mean, I guess so. With Event Tech Live, it's Adam's built what I think is an awesome event, but it's like he's also tried to build this smart event so that you get away from the paperless side of stuff that you talked about. And it's kind of, we still have people, we're a tech company, and we still have people that are coming to our booth today asking for something to take away, even though that they've tapped to get a brochure or we've scanned or whatever's gone on. But it's kind of like, is there, for some of those bigger companies, do they need to just kind of say, no, we're not doing that anymore? Can they do that? Like, why wouldn't an organizer do that? I don't know if you've had that from either of your backgrounds.
I think there's an element of people being scared to use it. I think if you are running, especially like you were saying, these events over the years, and it's like the 10th year it's happening, does that organizer want to be the first person that kind of steps out of the box and goes, okay, well, this year we're going to push boundaries, and then it all goes wrong? So I think there's an element, okay, I'm not going to push it, I'm not going to mix things up this year, I'm just going to stick to that process. And I suppose some people kind of think of sometimes using technology that it causes stress, adds time, and is really tiring for them because they can't use it properly sometimes. And so I don't know, I think it's really an element of fear sometimes, the technology.
So is that also maybe the technology not being quite right yet then, as in it's not a fully, let's say, a SaaS solution that they can take control of and go and do that themselves?
Yeah, I think training comes in a lot of the time, to kind of train the staff in that they're using it, particularly if you're on site an event, to make sure everyone knows. But also it's communication to the attendee, because if it's great if the organizer understands, and it's nothing better working with a client who is tech savvy, and it's like, okay, I want to use tech at this event, it's great. But they don't want to be a test subject either for a trial. But in the end of the day, even if the event organizer understands it, if you get to the event and the attendees just don't get it or don't understand how to use it, and we've seen that with communication, if we're giving an app for an event, the communication you send out for the person to download that app, how to use the app, it can be really important. And it's little things like that can really help, because then they can understand before they even get there, okay, this is how to use it. And it's maybe kind of understanding not everyone has their iPhone in their hand 24/7. Not everyone works like that, and it's kind of understanding, well, okay, for this event, what is the audience? What's the demographic? Have they really used tech before? And gradually building them up and maybe using a kind of more diluted option for them.
So you've mentioned apps a few times as an example, and it's kind of it seems very apparent that in that corporate sector, in that meeting sector, or where there is serious schedules to be done or networking to be done, very popular and that drive of take up because you've taken away the paper or pamphlet or whatever it might be. But then in the exhibition side, you constantly see a lot of articles, white papers, features, whatever it is about driving app take up. So is it that not that apps are wrong, but that they need to evolve as well?
Yeah, no, I think it's like, I don't think it is. I think it's, well, the first case I was saying is making sure we're using what elements of the app we're using is correct for that actual event, and having it as simple as possible, and cater for that actual event. But also, yeah, I don't think the app is wrong. I think it's the link and the communication between the supplier and the client or the organizer, and making sure that everyone understands what's going on. And like, it's on both sides. The organizer needs to be very clear to the supplier, okay, this is what the event is, this is the kind of people we're dealing with, this is what we really need it for. And then for the supplier to look at that and really take that into account, rather than kind of thinking, okay, well, this app has worked for a past event, it's going to work for everything the same.
And so I guess that's part of the fix-it side of things. There needs to be more of a conversation between whoever, corporate event, exhibition organizer, whatever they are, with certain type of supplier, rather than just, here's a tick list of stuff I want. There needs to be an earlier conversation, perhaps, about the how and the why.
Yeah, I think if you look at anything that's on trend, within the event or exhibition space. So, a couple of years ago it was apps. Now, beginning of the year, it was VR. Now people are starting to turn towards data visualization and in order to get insights, and AI is things that are coming down the line. But I think what tends to happen, and this is an evolutionary thing, in a Darwinian sort of context, that if it works, it will be adopted. If it doesn't, and I do agree with the point about the tech provider and the client. I think a lot of technology that comes in on the early stages is created by tech people who have got specialisms within that particular field, and then they translate it into an event proposition, and then present it to the event or exhibition organizer. And I think a lot of tech solutions out there solve a problem that doesn't exist or require a massive sort of behavioural change from either the visitor or the exhibitor, and then it dies off. And I think in order for tech to be more successfully implemented and adopted, that discussion between the tech provider and the end user, being the exhibition organizer or the event organizer, needs to be a lot closer, and almost needs to be sort of like in the development stage before it actually comes to market.
A lot more market research, basically.
Definitely.
In short. So there was a question up there that we actually discussed the other day as well, of don't you think there is an opportunity... Can you see those questions? No. Okay, so don't you think there is an opportunity where event organizers can use technology rather than using an Excel spreadsheet to run their show? This is something that Roisin talked about quite heavily, and it was kind of how do you change people that do still use spreadsheets as their central database, for example? How do you change them to running it onto technology? How do you engage with them to take up tech to make their life easier?
Yeah, registration systems are amazing, and to get off Excel sheets makes every event organizer's life way easier. But also Excel sheets are a very big part of event organizers' lives. I think the key really is for them to understand the system and how to use it. And I think it can be a kind of clash with processes. The old process they might have had with the Excel sheets might necessarily be exactly the same process when they're using a system. And it's trying to merge the two of them and kind of so they work together so they can understand. So because I think a lot of people want to keep the exact same processes they had, and not necessarily the system is going to be, you're going to be able to use that. So I think training is really important, and also to have an open mind for the event organizer that there will be kind of a tricky time at the start and extra time spent. But after that, and once they kind of improve their processes to kind of link in with the new systems they're using, in the long run, it'll be much more beneficial.
So is there potential, I mean, I know they're already out there, but is there more potential for, say, consultants or agencies or companies that are bridging that gap between that type of organizer and any type of event tech to help them along that process as well, rather than the tech provider just saying, yeah, this is how you do it, of course it's easy. So do you think there'll be more of that over the coming years, for example?
Yeah, so like I think it's that link. It's kind of to have someone who kind of understands the tech side of things, because we do have a lot of people who just don't like that side of things, and to them at the start they're just like, they just don't want to do it, they don't want to use a system, they don't want to use technology. And I do think this is changing, and we have to be fair that most people do use technology every day in their lives. But I think it is to have that link in the kind of where they're working with someone who kind of will be able to be the translator nearly between the organizer and the supplier. But I think it can lead into things at the moment, because you have a lot of platforms and it's trying to link those platforms together. And obviously this is a big issue, particularly in event registration, is the APIs are not just there yet. And obviously there's all these kind of all for one platforms, and they're great, but not necessarily every organizer needs everything at that platform, so they can be quite scary to look at. They're going, well, we don't need all of that, we only need these elements, so they will go for something smaller, but that later on can cause problems because it doesn't link with other stuff, and then that's where all the Excel sheets start being downloaded.
And so that was one of the questions of actually, if the broken part is trying to create synergy between the many often fragmented event tech options, I know it from our side in the tech provider, we've obviously got tech, we've got ways of it integrating. One event, such as Event Tech Live, might have 4 or 5 other different event tech providers all trying to do trying to do their own thing for that event. So where does it fall? Like, who does that integration? Because one company will always say the other company needs to integrate with them. Maybe whoever's got the central data is trying to push that to someone else. So who's controlling that? And actually, who pays for it? Because unless those companies are in serious partnership with each other, who should pay for the work to make that stuff talk seamlessly together?
And it's like what you were saying there, it can be confusing for someone who's sitting the other side of things and is the organizer and might know everything about the technology, and they have all these people bombarding them going, no, we can link with your system, or we can do this, and they don't know the answer. And they don't know who to go with, they don't know, it's a trust element, and I think that needs to be, again, a communication between, and kind of, maybe it's on the organizer side as well for me, more research and more understanding of the products.
Guys, I think you've been sort of integrating these questions into the discussion, actually. But if we now sort of officially move on to the Q&As on the screen, would be brilliant. We'll start with the one at the top. Apologies if you've already answered it, do let me know. And we'll try and get through as many as we can. So, what's the first one on the screen here that's yet to be answered?
Should event tech suppliers move further up the value chain?
There you go.
I'm going to say yes.
Surprise, surprise.
Please. I mean, it's should they move further up the value chain? I mean, they're kind of as much as, you know, stand building and all that kind of stuff, and even building the show off of a floor plan from the very first stage. It's the first part that quite often you engage with technology outside of your CRMs and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like technology should be what Jim was sort of saying earlier about, you know, not thinking about that event in 8, 9 months, 10 months time. It should be thinking that 2, 3 year and how the technology will help evolve and drive those events in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th or 5th year maybe.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that one. Should event tech suppliers move further up the value chain? I think they should be at the top of the discussion point when it comes to, you know, how to progress and further your event or exhibition, simply due to the fact that technology is the only thing that's changing within that sphere. So it should absolutely be at the top. How do they get themselves talking at that top table is a different question. And, you know, I think probably everyone is just absolutely zero focused on data and insight. And if you can provide that and do demonstrable ROI, then any sensible organizer will start talking to you.
Because, I mean, I guess that's from our perspective, there's always nice to haves that you could add into the technology, but everything we do is driven around what insight it could provide. Because if it can't provide insight, it's almost, in our opinion, it's almost what's the point? Would that be the same when you're talking to your clients, for example?
Well, just on that point, it's just, you know, can it provide insight? It's got to, but it's almost that immediacy. It has to provide instant insight. Otherwise, you know, the benchmarking of 3 or 4 years, and I think this is something that I'm probably going to start boring people with. But, you know, a lot of organisers and suppliers are pretty much focused on that 12-month cycle. And that is what, you know, in order to sort of wedge the door open, you've got to provide that with a view of, you know, with a view of backing the 3 and 4 year long tech that will ultimately provide the big dividends.
So just back to that question, possibly, but to go further up the value chain, I mean, when you come into the corporate events, I know it's easier if you're a more established company because you can probably have those relationships, but if you're a new tech company that does have something amazing, how do they get into your corporate space? Like, how do they have those conversations with senior team, for example?
I think, as I was saying before, it's very important for them to do a bit of research beforehand. Like, if someone came to me and was like, okay, well, it's like, this does this, and it's a gamification or something, but which I would love to be using that, but our clients don't need that at the moment. So it's really understanding what we need and what the challenges are, and like how they can help not only like the event organisers and make their lives easier. I think in the end of the day, that's what, from our point of view, that's what technology should be doing, is making people's lives easier and kind of more productive, I suppose. And then obviously going on the other side, you do have the wow factor and using, as you were saying before, like kind of a technology that isn't really solving a problem but is just cool and looks like a gimmick, I guess. But sometimes that can work depending on the event. So I think there's two elements of it. There's event technology that's helping people as a job and their everyday processes, and then there's the other event technology which is just adding pizzazz to an event.
We have 5 thumbs up for this question. Converting to technology is a daunting task. Is technology, you see there's a question itself, now I can't read it. Is technology definitely more reliable than using Excel? What about crashes?
Has anyone had Excel freeze before?
Yes.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot to say about robustness of platforms and how things are built and how they're stored, and there's probably not enough maybe shared about that.
I think there's a lot more room for human error on Excel if you're using the system correctly. I think that's what it all comes down to. I think if you know how to use a system and you're doing it right, then technically it should work perfectly. And I think the problem is people not understanding how to use it or not being familiar enough with it.
I mean, you could, just thinking of that as you're saying that, you could also say that if your internet connection goes down at your desk or home or wherever you are working abroad, using Excel could actually be the backup to doing it. Answer that one.
I mean, just on that question about Excel, I presume we're just talking about sort of like just leaving Excel spreadsheets with sort of like a populated email, because Excel is an incredibly powerful tool, and if you start using it and start using SQL code in there, you know, you pretty much can get anything that's out on the market through that one Excel spreadsheet. So I guess that question's posed with, okay, we just got Excel spreadsheets lying around gathering dust, you know, diminishing on a monthly basis.
That's what I've assumed it to be.
Yeah, okay. And in which case, you know, if that's how you're using Excel, I'd probably suggest you change how you use Excel.
Guys, I think what we're going to do is would like each one of you to choose a question off the list, answer it, pass it along the line. We'll do that 3 times, and then we'll close up.
Who would like to go first?
So what? I answer one question that I can pick.
You choose one that you'd like to answer from
Okay.
this list.
Okay, I'll go first then, Matt. Are we giving visitors enough credit? Most people have smartphones, Netflix, and shop online. I think they can tap a badge. Wrong. Basically, the way I see this is that the usability of things like smartphones, Netflix, and shopping online, people do this on a daily basis, and, you know, on almost an hourly. So, you know, I lost count the amount of times I've gone into Netflix in the last month to watch Narcos and all of that sort of stuff. The majority of people only go to an exhibition once, maybe twice a year. Then they're being provided with different tech solutions and different processes and different procedures. So are they clever enough to tap a badge? Of course they are. If you sit them down and educate them and talk them through the process, and then they'll have a great time. The thing is, people haven't got that time, and therefore, as soon as the element of complexity comes in, where there's a new way of doing something, you're going to get resistance. And that is the big challenge of tech within events and exhibitions.
Okay. The one I'd like to look at is the excessive use of technology can create barriers rather than eliminate them. Discuss. Of course, technology can create barriers. It can also open them. I mean, we're in an open environment here. There's lots of noise going on. Most of you got headphones on, so hopefully I'm not being too loud, but you're using technology to hear the session that's going on. You're using Glisser for the screen sharing for the questions. Like, that's so much better than maybe some people who would shy away from asking questions for whatever reason, but they can now anonymously go to that URL and ask a question. So that's an enabler to hopefully engage an audience a lot better at your event. If you get into the whole point of, you know, people being on phones in sessions and all that kind of stuff, that happens too, but not every session or not every bit of that, you know, 40-minute session is relevant to everyone. So it's kind of, I think if people there can look at what they're up to next and they feel a bit more relaxed about doing it, I think great. It's about how it's deployed and how it's sort of monitored and used, I suppose. Final choice.
Don't you have to keep moving forward just to keep pace? Otherwise, others will gain an advantage. I think I could have touched on this earlier a bit, and it's whether do we just give people options? Like, should there be a non-tech option at events? Like, obviously this is a different kind of event, but if we were going back to corporate or any other events, like, should you have the programs there and all this stuff, or should we be going forward that, okay, look, this is kind of what we have to do to move forward and just let people learn how to use it. And it's in all other fields, that's what's happened. Like, even just look at the smartphone or anything. So I think that, again, you just need to look at the kind of, again, look at the audience and kind of just be careful how fast you're going. And I think, because sometimes depending on the kind of demographic, it might be better to gradually build up the technology you're using and kind of ease them off. But it really depends very much on the event, and I think that's what they need to look at, is the different sectors of events when applying technology to them.
Okay, and I'm just going to go to this one of what you did. What was the single most effective thing? Because about 2 seconds ago, that was the last question on the list. So I'm going to fire that off to you, and then we'll round up. Thank you.
So of what you did, what was the single most effective thing? Pertinent to last night, voting. Sorry to close it on that subject as well. Of what you did, what was the single most effective thing? I'm not quite sure how to answer that.
I think if you're talking sort of like in terms of exhibition or event tech, the single most effective thing that you can do is just question it in a way that, from an organiser viewpoint, does it make you money? Does it save you time? Or does it save you money? If it's yes to any of those, it's worth pursuing. And then the only other thing that I would do is, once you've taken it past that stage, I would probably look to there going, right, how can we take the complexity out of it? Because unquestionably, there will be a complexity within that tech that doesn't need to be there, and just making things nice and simple for whether it's the organiser, the exhibitor, or the visitor.
Okay, and I guess then on that, guys, from the supplier side of things, I would say get to the top of the food chain, however it is, if it's through partnership, collaboration, whatever it might be. But if you can have that conversation with more senior of the team that can then drive a directive to help deploy, so this is for the suppliers in the room, but that can help deploy that technology across events, you're in a far better place talking at the top with that mandate coming down of this needs to happen, compared to individual silos on individual events trying to make individual decisions.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I think it's very relevant what you say about, our audience has sat there, majority of them with headphones on. posting questions on Glisser, and afterwards can tap their badge on the back wall and watch this video again. I mean, these are all really simple bits of tech, but they really have enhanced this experience. So thank you so much to our panel. Thank you to Matt Coyne, to Roisin Abrelachan, and to Jim Curry. And I just would like to remind you at 1 o'clock, we have our Launchpad pitch competition, which is happening on the Launchpad stage. Startups and suppliers with new event tech will be battling it out there to be the winner, and you can guarantee that the one who wins will be back here at Event Tech Live 2017. So that might be an interesting thing to watch. And we'll be also having another session on this stage at 1 p.m, which is 15 minutes time, on how AT&T created digital experiences anchored in brand truth at Mobile World Congress. So thank you ever so much for your time and attention. Thank you to the guys on stage, and maybe I'll see you later. Thanks, bye-bye.